What's the haps, chaps? Welcome to a Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing that game that's just an excuse to talk about records. Today we're going to be forging a connection between Smoke Reverser from OCs and My Murdered Remains from They Might Be Giants. So what we have here is a little game I came up with my brother being Plastic Eric, and he's over on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. Every Monday he shows a record, every Thursday I show a record, and those albums have to be related to each other in some way. We go in an endless circle, and we ask you to guess what the connection between the two records is. And you can leave that guess down in the comments. But first, we've got to clear up the previous connection between Smoke Reverser and Mojo Nixon and Skid Roper's Bodacious. And almost had a right guess there, but nobody got it. And the answer is that each album had a band photo with somebody hanging upside down on some monkey bars. With Mojo, it was on the front cover, and with the OCs, it was on the inside jacket. But we had people hanging with their hair sticking up in the air, flipped upside down to make their hair stand up, hanging from monkey bars. So that was the connection. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. So Smoke Reverser, with a name like that, it's like Smuckers, you know, it's got to be good because it doesn't mean anything. It looks like I have a suspicion that it is an anagram of something. This is a band that has used anagrams before. They had two albums called Protean Threat and Panther Rotate, which are anagrams of each other. And I feel like Smoke Reverser has to be an anagram of something. I'm not sure what, but smoked doesn't really mean anything. It's the past tense of smite. And so as a verb, Smoke Reverser, that doesn't mean anything. And the album cover it's glorious, don't get me wrong, but it suggests something that sort of turns me off, as cool as an illustration is, and it makes me, whenever I look at the cover, I see the buildings in the front, and I think, gosh, those buildings must have been built in better times. I know it's just an illustration, but that's what I think of. I'm sure the world wasn't on fire when they built those lovely buildings, but things took a turn for the worse. Anyway, I only got a chance to listen to the album earlier today, and it went back and forth. The song, and I'm going to blank on all the song titles, but the very long one that has something to do with aggressiveness, I think, in the title, was in like a very jumpy 7/8 time, was an instrumental 11 minutes long, however long that was, and that was kind of a trial for me to get through, if I'm honest. But other times, I think you could probably make up a key from songs I enjoyed more and the songs that I enjoyed less. If the organ was prominent and it had more of that Steppenwolf feel, I probably liked it okay. And there was one song right at the beginning. I don't think it was C. I think it was the second song. I remember the song title C, I think was track 3. That really played both sides of the tracks. It had a pummeling guitar opening that would kind of go into this Magic Carpet Ride section and then go back to the pummeling guitars. And so their mix of heavy metal and psychedelic was better to me than their mix of heavy metal and prog, which is how that long instrumental struck me. But I would agree with what Eric said, that the last side, or the last 3 tracks, were probably the ones that I enjoyed the most. Especially, there was the flies that bumped the windshield thing, and then the song before that. Again, sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Probably wouldn't be in a rush to listen to it. Eric bought me one album, I think from a similar era, called Floating Coffin. So I do have one of their albums. He thought it was one of their more accessible titles, and then it would be a good entryway point for me to get into some OCs if I was going to get into some OCs. But that remains the only OCs album that I have at this point. And so for a connection, I went with They Might Be Giants, My Murdered Remains. This album came out in 2018, as did the Smoke Reverser album. That is not the connection. And it is also the second or third, depending on how you count it, album that They Might Be Giants released that year, which is also the case for Smoke Reverser. And that is also not the connection. I believe now I'm losing faith that I know the OCs release a ton of records, and I think I looked up that Smoke Reverser was not their only album of 2018. But I could be wrong on that. But if I'm right, that's not the connection. So They Might Be Giants. This is an album. I haven't gotten terribly familiar with it. The opening track is called The Communists Have the Music. That was one that actually my eldest child picked up on and sort of got me into. And it is a good one. It's a barn burner. So it has joined my list of favorite They Might Be Giants songs. But I thought it was a companion album because it had the same art style. The other 2018 album called I Like Fun, which was, I think, more of just a studio album, whereas this is explicitly, I think, a collection of their dial-a-song songs from that year. They Might Be Giants has on and off throughout their history offered this dial-a-song service where you call a phone number and get a short little They Might Be Giants songs. They had done it in 2015. They did it in 2018. I think they did one in between, and there are several albums that are Glean, Phone Power, and My Murdered Remains that I think are all sort of compilations of those dial-a-song songs. But I never dialed the dial-a-song line, but I knew about it since all the way back in their inception in the 80s. I've been a fan of They Might Be Giants since the first album and have kept up with them, but probably the Mink Car and No era, right around the turn of the 21st century, are the last albums that I listened to enough to really know the records. Everything since then, and probably not coincidentally, since I had kids, is less familiar to me. So albums like The Spine and The Else and Nanobots and Join Us, they got a ton of records I'm less familiar with. I've picked out a track or two maybe and have picked up on, but yeah, probably right around Mink Car and No is where I lost the ability to sing along with They Might Be Giant songs. So even though I like The Communists Have the Music, I don't know the words yet. I couldn't sing along with it. I'm getting too old. There's too many songs in my head and too many other things to have to think about. But listening to the rest of it, so this one I actually did play a couple of times over because the kids are more into it, listening to They Might Be Giants than they are listening to the OCs. So I could play it in the car and things like that. And I think there's lots of promising tracks on here. The song Unctuous Robot sounds like it would be a candidate for an OC song with some of the song titles they have. They got two songs that repeat just one word 3 times. Applause, 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 and tick, tick, tick. And Last Wave. And my particular copy, my version of it, has a second bonus disc on it that's got maybe even some of the stuff that I like more. It's got a cover of Starry Eyes, the records track, Starry Eyes, which we did way back when on the Collection Connection. The songs kind of bounce between feeling like completed studio songs and some feel very sort of the moment, probably put together in a half hour, like very early They Might Be Giants. You know, it's very unpolished, which I like the unpolished They Might Be Giants, and I like the polished They Might Be Giants. They just have such a long discography that I haven't been able to keep up with it all. So I Like Fun had a great song called Let's Get This Over With. That's the opening track on that album. The opening track on this album is Communists Have the Music. So those two songs have wormed their way into my subconscious in a way that puts them in with some of my favorite They Might Be Giants tracks. But again, the kids can sing along with Let's Get This Over With. I still don't have the words down. I'm just getting too old. Yeah, it's an interesting mix of songs. If you know They Might Be Giants, you know they're very short songs. And maybe the dial-a-song songs specifically seem to sort of be taking a specific idea. There's a song on here called Dog that seems to be playing with microtonal uh, tunings where it's not only dissonant, but it's a weird kind of dissonant with notes that just don't seem like they should be happening. And yeah, I don't know. I've probably talked enough at this point. Our next episode, Eric's connection to this album, is going to be our 300th episode. So you definitely want to tune in for that one. Eric promised he's going to do something spectacular. I'm not sure what that could be. But I'm sure we'll find out. He didn't promise anything. I just wanted to make him nervous for a second. But yeah, with that, I will throw My Murdered Remains from They Might Be Giants 2018 over to Eric, and he will find a connection for our big 300th episode and talk about that album on Monday. So you can look forward to that. And that's all I have. So I say thank you for watching, and bye-bye.